really hope you enjoy this video. Subscribe, like, and click the bell to be notified of more fantastic music content just like this. Welcome to the Need to Know Music Show with me, Ronan McManus, here on Switchbox TV. And today I'm joined by an Alabama-born artist and songwriter, Adam Hood. How are you?
I'm doing well, guys. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, all good. All good. Yeah, we're just here. We've just coming out of some restrictions, and the COVID thing is all kind of ruined everybody's 2020. How's it been? How's it been for you? If that's not a stupid question.
It's yeah, I'd say pretty much par for the course. I mean, you know, it's put a nice big halt on everything. However, I will say this: as far as like live shows go, I've done more than I would have expected. And you know, there are a few venues that someone like me that just is a singer-songwriter, I go in by myself. No band. Shows can be socially distanced, quarter capacity, half capacity. Everybody's got masks on. You know, people understand that, you know, usually I'll go from dressing room to stage, back to dressing room. There's not a whole lot of social time. And everybody's been pretty cool about that. And so because of that, I've stayed a lot busier than most, you know, but about half speed for me, you know. So yeah, it's been a little bit of a halt, but a lot of good's come out of it though.
Yeah, you've been, because you do you're a songwriter for other artists. Well, you kind of like it's like a profession for you, isn't it? The songwriting. So I presume, I mean, do you write on your own, or do you do co-writes? How does that normally work for you, and how has it been different in this year?
Co-writing is pretty much the majority of the stuff that I do, and that's really, I mean, for no other reason. It's just because of the fact that I just don't have that many ideas, to be honest with you. You know, when you've got a week and I've got 2 co-writing appointments, I've usually only got about 2 or 3 ideas anyway. So, but at the same time, though, I like the collaboration. I like the whole fellowship of it. You know, it's fun to me. I like another person's perspective on ideas. Nice to bounce stuff off. So yeah, that's kind of how things go. But at the same time, you know, I never saw the separation. I understand the separation. I realized I understand the thoughts behind you should be artist or writer, but I've never wanted to do one as opposed to the other, if that makes sense. So, yeah. So it's kind of, I'm always writing for other people, with other people, in the hopes that the other people that I write will record songs for sure. But you know, I'm always willing to, I want to be able to record my own stuff if I participate in it, and I want to make it good enough to where I'll love it too, you know?
Yeah. I mean, do you separate your time out? I mean, when you're writing for people, do you specifically know when a song is one that you want to do, or how does that work? I mean, do you kind of, it's be hard not to keep the real good stuff for yourself, write something really good and you think, oh, I'll have that one, you know, but how do you do it? Do you write, when you're writing with people, are you writing specifically for them to use, or do you kind of write and put them in a big bucket and pick out the best ones? How does it work?
Yeah, it's kind of, it's a pretty organic process, you know. I mean, I heard Tom Petty say one time that you know, and granted, this is a Cliff Notes, he said, you know, that people don't really, when someone wants to write with you, they're not wanting to necessarily write with a person because they want that person to adjust to their stuff. Usually if they're coming to me, I mean, you know, there are styles of music that I'm terrible at, but there's also, I feel like I'm one of those people that kind of has a niche. If there's a certain thing that you want on your album, if there's a certain song that you want to sing, and it's kind of what I do. I'm one of the guys for the job, you know, and so I feel like that when people come to me, they're sort of expecting that.
Right.
So
okay.
They expect that. It is something that the greasier, groovier side of songs, it lends itself to where, you know, I mean, unless it's just, you know, I write with females that sing in a higher register than I do. So, you know, there's key changes and things like that, and some context, but typically, you know, it kind of happens organically. You know, it turns into a song that's more suited for them, or turns into a song that's more suited for me. So
yeah. So did you kind of want to do this from the start, the songwriting side of things? That was always your aim, or were you kind of an artist first, or was it a bit of both when you were younger?
I feel like that I've kind of when I made my mind up that this is what I wanted to do, I made my mind up that this is what I wanted to do. I started, my parents got me a guitar when I was really young. And so I really latched on to, I started playing in church and stuff like that. And so I latched on to the, gospel music and Christian music and stuff that was in my youth group. And when I was 16, my mom had a cassette tape of John Hyatt's Bring the Family. And that was the day that the light went on for me, and it was because of the fact that Hyatt, especially with that album, Have a Little Faith in Me, was recorded by so many people. And at that time, when I heard that record, when I heard Hyatt's record, Bonnie Raitt, her version of Thing Called Love was actually a single. So I had seen it on VH1. I thought, man, that's a cool song. A month later, my mother comes home with a cassette tape that's got the guy that wrote it. And his version is way cool. It's really complex. A lot of interesting, I don't know, the parts are just, I can still listen to it today and be equally as fascinated. So, I've
never heard that version of that song, actually. I must check that out. That's the first. We always do a recommendation near the end of the interview, but we'll put that down as our first recommendation. Check out John Hyatt's version of that song. So, yeah.
Oh, it's fascinating. I mean, that whole record is we could talk forever about just that record. Like I said, that was a definitive moment for me to decide what I wanted to do.
Fantastic. And it was, but I mean, your voice seems so effortless. And the way you sing is just it's such a smooth, kind of beautiful thing. And that's one of the things I wanted to get onto a bit later when listen to your stuff. I really enjoyed taking a deep dive into your music. It really has been an absolute pleasure to do so, because your voice is so great. It seems strange that you might take the choice to kind of do some stuff behind the camera sort of thing, behind the scenes, to sort of choose to be there, because you've obviously, it's for something very natural for you.
I appreciate that.
So how did all that sort of? So when you were born in Alabama, was it musical upbringing?
No one in my family can carry a tune in a bucket, man. I mean, no. And my parents don't sing. My father was he was a forest management. He was in forestry, and my mother, she was in real estate. So, we were pretty blue collar people, and so I kind of found it on my own and sort of went through the whole thing on my own, really, so yeah, pretty interesting. It's my own special thing.
Yeah. Brilliant. So what age were you again when the John Hyatt album entered your life and switched on that switch?
16. I was 16.
16, right? Okay, yeah. So did you learn the guitar then? Was that kind of the decision you made then? I'm going to learn. Had you already been playing a bit?
Yeah, I started out playing guitar more than anything. I mean, I was probably 12, 13, maybe when really. I mean, of course, like I said, when I was a child, grade school kid, my parents had guitars or they had one for me, and I don't know. I feel like that I didn't have the attention span to retain information and really sit down and focus on the songs until like junior high school. And so I was really into guitar playing. Guitar is my first love. Guitars are kind of like muscle cars when it comes to, just the hobbies and stuff like that. And so I really am, as far as like being studied on something, I really am pretty knowledgeable about electric guitars, acoustic guitars, stuff like that. Like that would be the hobby part of it, So I did that first.
Certainly something that I picked out from your records is your guitar sounds are fantastic. The electric guitar sounds are so actually, sort of the production in general on your stuff was just, especially the latest album, the 2018 album, I should say, was really one that the Welcome to the Big World. The guitar sounds, especially on that, are just absolutely, brilliant. Just the right amount of clear and clean and dirt and grime and power and everything. I really found, especially those rhythm electric guitars, were just great sounding. So to hear that you kind of studied the electric guitar kind of makes sense, Well,
you sort of learn how to keep it simple when that's the thing. I've never tackled it all on my own. And because, I always kind of make the joke that I'll never be anything but Adam Hood's guitar player. I'll never have another job. I play guitar where I can play great guitar for Adam Hood, and that's about it, But the other guys that played, like Rob McNally was one of them that played on Welcome to the Big World. he's fascinating. And the somewhere in between that record, I did most of the guitar work on that. But you get into it and you realize that there's just it takes learning to have to unlearn how to do things, to keep it simple as far as guitar stuff goes. I mean, it's just as simple as, it's like, I mean, you go back and you look at what Knopfler and Clapton and guys like that. I mean, it was Strats straight into a Princeton, not dry, and so you realize those things and you go, oh, okay, well then I could try that. I could take all this junk out of the way and simplify and then you start, then you learn to play. Then you start realizing what's in, the tones in your hands, and you're off to the races after that.
Yeah, I think it's also that that goes with playing, learning sort of what to do. When not to play is one of the big things. I mean, I was listening to "Come Together" by the Beatles the other day, and what struck me is on the outro how little George Harrison is doing.
Yeah,
and it's just those little sort of licks, and then nothing for ages, and then another version of the same thing, and it's so minimalist, and it's got its place in the way that song breathes, and it's but I wanted to sort of talk a little bit about your first album, 21 to Enter. It was a live album, so is that just a recording off the desk? It feels like was it one gig or was it a series of gigs? How did that go?
It was all one show, with the exception of the last song. So all I think there's like 11 songs on that one. So 10 of the songs, yes, same thing. I mean, it's a board tape, and you can actually hear the reverb come on halfway through the first song. Like first verse of the first song, it's dry, and then about somewhere in the chorus, the sound engineer pressed that reverb button, and you can hear the reverb come on. So it's pretty loose,
Yeah.
But I mean, they were all the first, like that was the first batch of songs that I'd really written it. And I played that show. It was at the Loft in Columbus, Georgia. And I played that show, and it was basically a songwriter's night. I would always go open for other people, and then they had a songwriters competition and stuff. And so I stayed in Columbus at the Loft a lot. And then the other place, the last song was recorded at Eddie's Attic in Atlanta, Georgia, and that's a pretty legendary place. I know Mayer got started there. Clay Cook, who was in Zach Brown's band, got started there. Jennifer Nettles, the Indigo Girls. A lot of great Southeastern singer-songwriter groups came out of Eddie's Attic. So, yeah.
Well, it's a pretty flawless performance if it's mostly one gig. Fair play to you, because it's a brave thing to put out a live thing. Normally, you're sort of one of those things you'll sort of record it and go, I'm going to put this one out, and they listen back to it and go, maybe I won't. That's always the one you do. There's also the one that you think went well, didn't go as well as you thought, But it's really well performed. Everything's fantastic. So
Thank you.
Really proud of yourself.
I think we haven't done it since, I mean, and for that very reason, for the fact that I put that out because we didn't have anything else. It was my first record, and and I was needing to play shows, and I just couldn't find. It was kind of the opposite at that time. Like I didn't have any relationship with anyone in a studio, and no band, and I was playing all by myself, and just there was no collaboration, and so the only option that I really had when it was time to put out that record for the sake of getting other gigs was to just put it out, and that was the best board tape that I had. But we, like you said, I mean, we've recorded other shows at other times, and I just can't get out there. I mean, it's not. I don't know. It's just like you said, it's just that's the beauty of the studio, that you can really kind of lay the concrete out in the studio, and you can embellish on it live, but we've never had the opportunity. We've never had it be great, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I think that, I mean, at that time, maybe if you'd gone into the studio, you could have spent all that money and just played the songs live anyway. You wouldn't have ended up you might have ended up with a more crisp kind of sound here and there, and maybe a bit more produced quality of sound, but performances wouldn't necessarily have been any better than they were. So if from that angle, you think, well, why spend all that money on going to the studio when this is good enough to put out? It's great. So yeah, fair play to you. So yeah, brilliant.
Thanks.
I was listening to all your stuff, and the two albums that really sort of leapt out of me was the Welcome to the Big World, so the first song, "Don't That Sound Like Love." I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, the halftime verses kind of took me by surprise, because if you put them full time, normal time, it's kind of a straightforward country song, and then you put them verses half time, and suddenly it's like blues, southern rock, down and dirty. It's like, and the guitar parts come out really, the bluesy guitar parts come out, and it gives it a different. Then it switches to the kind of the more country sort of chorus. Was that something that you did on purpose, or were you ever tempted? Did that song ever have a version where it was just full on country all the way through?
No, that was how that song was written. I was going through my Freddie King phase, and that there's that song "Woman Across the River," that, and his "Woman Across the River" was way different. It was one. I mean, granted, it was a. I want to say that his was the opposite. Like, his was a more upbeat verse, and then it slowed way down to like a blues swing in the chorus. And
Right.
so I took that idea and said, man, I'd love to do a song like that sometime. And I took it and then just switched it. And then the lyrics started coming after that, And so yeah, that was kind of the intention with that song, was to sort of make it a halftime, full-time kind of thing. So yeah.
Because it really sort of gives it a different, sort of feel, because it gives you that real kind of like that sort of bluesy edge really comes in there, and then
Right.
it just turns, just like suddenly going, yeah, you sort of feeling that guitar, and I love all that, And,
Good. Thank you. Accomplished.
and the song "Welcome to the Big World." I mean, this was written for your daughter, is that right? I read something.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about that song and how that came about.
So the daughter that I wrote it about, she's 22 now, so she's
Wow.
grown and out of the house. But that song was written. I wrote it for when she was kind of in the early years of being a teenager, and you just kind of, boy, your heart goes out to them. You see how
I'm going through it right now. My
Yeah.
middle son's 11, my oldest son's 16, my daughter's only 7, which I've not get. So I'm in that sort of, the 11-year-old he's just gone to kind of high school now, and it's kind of like, it's just letting him go in on his own. It's just, oh God, it's just, seeing him walk off and go on the train or whatever. It's like, it's hard to let him go. So yeah, well, I really felt that. So that song really resonated with me.
Good. Well, that was the thing, and I agree with you. It's hard. It's hard to let him go, but it's really, that's, even though, you're not physically, it's not time to get him out of the nest. You really got to do, all you can do is just kind of put the bumpers in the gutters, and make sure that they're just, your effort is really minimal, but you're on call 24/7, and you should kind of be on call 24/7 and sort of expect the worst. And even, I mean, the worst meaning, just, there's just emotions involved, and we've all been there. And so that was my benchmark way to get that off my chest, just to say, look, I see what you're going through, and I'm sure it went over her head, but that's fine.
I'm sure she appreciates it now. She understands it would be, yeah.
I'm sure it was lost to her then, but that's to be expected.
I think dads in general are lost to teenage daughters anyway, so it's just, you don't exist for a good number of years then. Thankfully, my daughter's only 7 now, so I've got all that to look forward to. So I'm sure I'll revisit that song in a few years' time and go, yeah. Thanks, Adam. I got that.
Yeah, mission accomplished on my end.
And the one that really leapt at me was "Postcards and Payphones." I mean, that was such a beautiful sentiment in that song, and all of us that have kind of done music for our lives, and our wives have to kind of, they're on the other end of it, and and there's that thing, you so many years living with a ghost, and it's like, it was it was just, I really resonate with me, because it's, that was it's a beautiful sentiment, saying the hardest part of what I do is missing you. And that whole song just really grabbed me. Was it a personal experience song that you just kind of, it was just, or what was I'd imagined it was coming from
Yeah,
personal
for sure.
experiences. Yeah.
It was kind of the first. I mean, I'd say that a song was, the idea came, and we wrote that song within probably the first 2 years of my marriage. Just kind of, I mean, I got a pretty awesome wife, and I don't want to say she didn't know what she was getting into, but at the same time, I don't know that. I mean, I can't expect her to know what she's getting into when I don't even know what I'm getting into a lot of times, you know. And so the life on the road is pretty difficult. I wrote that song with Will Hogue, who is a really good friend, a guy that like I've been a fan of his music for a long time. So that was the first time that he and I ever sat down to write a song together. And I, you know, Will's a road dog too. And so you know, that was one that I sort of saved for him. And I had the first couple of lines and he just, you know, it fell in really easily because he understands. I mean, he's got young boys and a wife and, you know, you have to, that leaving, man, that's really, I always kind of say that's the stuff that they pay you for. They don't really pay you to get up on stage and play. I'd do that for free, but the whole having to just really commit to the being gone and separating yourself is really hard, you know.
Amen. Absolutely. I totally understand. Totally agree with that. You know, especially when they're very young and you're walking out the door, and then if you know you're gone for a while, and you know they're going to be different when you know you're missing some part of their growing up, and those years that you know they move on to the next step so quickly. You know, that you come back and you leave them and they're just barely walking, and they come back and they're shaving nearly. You know, it's like
I know.
it feels like that's in those weeks they just leap on so fast. So I know I totally get that. That was really one that really leapt out at me for obvious reasons. So,
Right.
and he did was another one. Now it sounds like it's a tribute to your father.
Correct.
Is that right? Yeah. So it's was that a personal song?
Yeah. So I mean, it was probably, I lost my dad about, well, January will probably be like 12 years ago. And so this was about 4 years into him being gone. And, you know, it's one of those things to where I didn't want it to be something I had to do, you know, man, songs like that are really interesting because of the fact that, you know, there's a part of me that says, why don't you just say these things in real time? You know, why don't you say these things when he was there? And you don't say those things when they're here because you don't realize it's time to, you know, I mean, you know, it was colon cancer. My dad died of colon cancer and pretty quickly, you know, it's about 2 years. And, you know, it's one of those things to where even when it happens, even when those things are going on, you still don't realize that it's fitting to say that. And so it took about 4 years to really work up the nerve to write that song and to say it in a way that wasn't, and to say it in a way that was sincere.
Yeah.
But that was also, you know, honest on both ends, you know, kind of not to be a tough guy, but at the same time to sort of just, you know, paying tribute to my father. You know, there's no, you know, I mean, I don't want to say you leave the I love yous out of it, but you pay tribute to a man. And so there's I feel like I really sort of handled it with kid gloves. And I wrote with Jason Meisler, and it was one of those things where we were struggling with a song for a couple of hours. And I said, look, let's just put this aside. I've got this other idea. And that song wrote itself in about 30 minutes. So, you know, kind of the same thing. It was just, you know, the timing, everything was really right for it.
Yeah. I mean, I lost my dad 9 years ago. It was just in November, near the end of November. It was only last week, 9 years ago. So, but I think it takes you a while to process that and work out how you're going to say it. It's easy to slip into, because it's easy to slip into too many kind of cliches and kind of emotions too high at that point to really process. And because you want to say it in a way that's, as you say, that sort of, that's kind of sincere and just an honest review of where it is. And I think it takes a while to kind of, to get that straight in your head. You know, you can't, it's great saying, I'm going to miss you and you were brilliant. And, you know, there's things that people always say about people who die. You don't want it to be that kind of a song, because that would be worse for it not to be accurate. I mean, it has to be accurate. Because it actually inspired me to start writing a song about my dad, but my dad didn't teach me about fixing trucks or any of that stuff, because he was a singer. He couldn't do any of that stuff. Same as me. I can't do any of that stuff. So, but he taught me how to sing. So I thought, well, maybe I could do a song that's a kind of that would be the angle on it. Like, he didn't teach me to fish, didn't teach me to fix cars. He didn't teach me to throw a baseball. Actually, he did teach me to throw a baseball, actually, because he played as a kid. But so he didn't teach me to do any of that sort of stuff that normal dads do, but he did teach me how to sing. So it's finding the right language, isn't it, for that sort of a song? It's it can't be thrown away too soon.
Man, that's cool. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it takes that, you know, I mean, it takes the normal, you know, the typical grieving process. You got to get past you got to get past, I don't want to say you got to get past it being personal, but you sort of have to
Well,
be
you
able
kind
to,
of do. Really. I mean, that's a
you
good
know,
way of
yeah,
putting it. It's a good
you
way of
got to
putting
be able
it.
to sing this song at night after night without choking up and stuff like that. And granted,
Exactly.
you know exactly how it is. I mean, it's still sometimes it still gets to me, but at the same time, I've gone through the deal enough and through enough years and through writing that song to where I can do it now and I can breathe through it and just, you know, yeah, I feel like we accomplished the task that we set out to do. So that's really
Brilliant.
cool. That's perspective about your dad. Sorry to hear it, but it's
No,
cool that you
it's
have an idea. That's a great angle.
yeah. So
Really.
that's going to be a co-write with you, inspired. But but it's I think it's right to sort of say that you've got to kind of find enough distance from it to speak just as much from your head as your heart as well. Because if it's
For sure.
fully heart, it can go slightly wrong. So maybe you need just enough of head and heart balance to kind of get that
Yeah.
balance right. But you certainly did good with that one. It's a beautiful song, and
Thank you.
congratulations on that one.
Thank
But I wanted to talk about the new album. Really, not the new album, but the 2018, the most recent one. Um, what I noticed more is that there's a real natural groove to the songs and arrangements, and it seems like Welcome to the Big World was more centered around your voice and the kind of the songs and guitar and that kind of thing. This one seemed to the bass lines really seemed to groove along on this one much more. So conscious effort to look at the bass lines of the band and the grooves a bit more on this album, or that's what came across to me.
Yeah, on the Somewhere in Between record. Yeah,
Somewhere in between. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in between with that one. That was the plan with that one. I wanted to. I've always played with just it's been me and a bass player and a drummer. So I mean, and at most we've been a 4-piece, you know. So and it was for a number of years. It was really challenging to take an album that was recorded with a 6-piece band and go reproduce it with a 3-piece band. You know, granted, we did the best we could, and nobody outwardly complained about it, but nonetheless, it was really hard, and it was a lot of work, and I kind of got tired of it. And so I said, you know, I made sure that I was intentional with my song choices, and I wanted to do 2 things. I wanted to make a record that was centered around a 4-piece band. That was the plan. Instead of having and granted, you know, there's pedal steel parts on some songs, but like, you know, the pedal steel didn't have to be there for all of it. The keyboards didn't have to be there for all of that record. And so that was kind of the intention. That was number one, to strip the band down. And so that's why the bass lines really stick out a whole lot more, because of the fact that was going to be the glue. Instead of it being a number of things, the glue was, you know, the bass lines was the glue that was holding the percussive part to the melodic part. All right. So
Right.
Other part was Pat McLaughlin, the guy that I wrote half of the record with, which is the guy that I've written like half of all my records with. Pat, man, is kind of a legend. He wrote a Steve Wariner song, a couple of Gary Allan songs, a lot of country songs. And he did this album with Dan Auerbach and from the Black Keys. And so
Right, yeah.
I heard the Auerbach album, and then I started looking at the credits, and I noticed that like Pat had written like 8 of these songs on here. And I said, you know, how did that go about? And he said, Dan and I have been writing a lot. And we just went in, and Dan wanted to make a record around the guitar vocal. Like, you know, when you go in and write a song, you write the song, and then when you're done, you get on your voice memo on your phone and you just press record. And it was the same way with Pat and I. Like, I listened back to some of those songs, and I was like, man, how can we just take this and record it and let you know what I mean? Can I put out a record that's just that? And so when he said that that's what he and Dan did, I said, oh, that's what I want to do too. And so basically that's what I did. So Orrin Thornton is the guy that produced this last record. And Orrin went in, and I told him, I said, look, I want Pat and I to sit in a room across from each other, 2 guys, two guitars, acoustic guitars, 2 mics. And we played the songs in front of each other, just like we would if we had finished writing the song. And that's what we did. And it really translated. I thought it was really awesome. So yeah, I mean it was a lot of fun.
It just is so natural sounding. Everything is just it just seems so mean, the whole record is kind of got a real kind of live, natural feel to it.
Great.
The bass lines are just grooving away and just beautiful
Yeah.
sound on them, and it's just the whole thing just sits so nicely, and your voice is so crisp and clear and beautiful.
Thank you.
But it was just one of those albums that it was near the end of it before I even realized it, and then when I went back and listened to it again, I was noticing other things that were going on. I was really, noticing. It just felt like it was just such a lovely album to listen to. And I mean, how do you achieve that? I mean, it's just like all the parts kind of, it feels like everyone was kind of done very, I don't know, it's very, not simply is not the right word, but it didn't seem like that it's something you'd agonize over. Everything just kind of just happened. Is that kind of the way that it came together?
I mean, it really is kind of, it's kind of getting the right guys for the job. And I'll give credit where it's due. I mean, Orrin Thornton was the guys that, Orrin, who now granted, Orrin, like on my Shape of Things album, Orrin did all the engineering on that. He and I have worked for years together, doing a lot of full production demos when I was at Carnival Music and stuff like that. So we've done a lot together. And when I approached him about making the album, he called Lex Price, who was the bass player, and Jerry Rowe, who was the drummer. And those guys are a pretty dynamic duo. And there's these pockets of when you record in Nashville, there's these pockets of players that seem to, you can get a hodgepodge of anybody you want to come in there and do anything you want to. I mean, but you can find guys that really work well together. And Lex and Jerry are pretty, they don't always come as a team. I mean, Jerry's played drums on a ton of stuff, and Lex has done the same thing. He's played bass, so many different projects, but having Orrin understand this is what we're going for with Adam's album. Lex and Jerry have to do this. And that's the thing. I mean, it's, I know sometimes that people wonder what a producer does, but that's the job that a producer does. I mean, really, every producer's different. I mean, I write for Dave Kopp. He does things a whole lot different, but at the same time with Dave, Chris Powell is his drummer. Brian Allen is his bass player. And usually when you go in and you do something with Dave, those two guys are going to be in there, because that's the same thing. he knows that he can get, if you can get your bass lines and you can get your percussions and your grooves and your rhythms nailed down, then that's it. I mean, you can.
But really, it seems like you've got loads of space to work with. There's like loads of space on the album, and like So the guitar parts can really come out when they come out, and you can hear everything that's going on.
Because that's how they used to make records. There's two schools of things. And I understand both of them. There are people that make records that say, I don't like space. And so if they hear space, they're going to fill it up with something. And that's cool. I get it. But then there are people like me that really appreciate space, because of the fact that if I want to learn how to play a song, I want to hear what they're doing. I want to be able to really understand the mechanics behind where their hand position is, what the instrument they're playing. Is it a Telecaster or is it a Les Paul? Is it a Strat? Is it whatever? What kind of amp is that? And I want to hear the difference. And so that's what I'm looking for when I listen to albums. Therefore, garbage in, garbage out. That's what I want to, I want to make that, so, and for all intents and purposes, to make my life easier, to where I can always go back and be able to recreate it live in any scenario, whether it's me with a 3-piece band, whether it's me with a 5-piece band, whether it's me by myself. I always want to be able to recreate it. And so, that's why I really shoot for space. But I also understand that there's a time and a place for it. And sometimes, the space is not that necessary.
Well, it's a brilliant album, I have to say. And it was just one of those things that I just really enjoyed listening to. I could hear everything that was going on, everything that sounds like you were looking to achieve. Right. You achieved it and more. So fair play to you. So what's next? That was 2 years ago, that album now that we recorded. So what have you been doing some recording now recently? What's happening?
Yeah, so I mean, we've got a really cool project that we're pretty much done with. It's off to mastering right now, and so
brilliant.
We went in. So Brent Cobb is a good friend of mine, and Brent, we've known each other for a long time. We wrote at the same publishing company for a long time, and Brent's been really helpful with helping me kind of think through my sound, because it's hard to do it on the inside. And I say Brent's probably one of my friends that's really helped. He and I have talked through it enough to where, I finally got to the point where I said, look, why don't you just produce the next record? And he said, okay, you got it. I'd love to. And so then the opportunity came up to go down to Capricorn Studios in Macon, Georgia. They've just revitalized the studio now. So, I mean, you're talking about, this is where the Allman Brothers were recorded. This is where Wet Willie recorded. This is where, they had just massive amounts. So this Capricorn is one of the places, I'd say Capricorn and Fame are probably two of the places where Southern rock was born. That's where it came out. So we got the opportunity to go to Capricorn. Well, that happened. And then my manager called Blackberry Smokes guys. And so Charlie, Charlie Starr, the lead guy, and Richard Turner, the bass player and the drummer, they came in and played. So it's basically me, my new album.
They're a great band, those guys, aren't they? Great players, those guys, aren't they? Yeah.
And so, I mean, we just went in there. We spent 4 days down in Macon. We rented the same house. We all stayed in the same house and hung out and just, made music. And it was the first time I've done this before, And so, I mean, it was really good. And I can't wait for you to hear it. It's a pretty cool record. It's kind of what you'd expect out of that kind of combination. But at the same time, like, I don't know. It's going to be pretty cool. I can't wait to see the reaction.
It doesn't sound like that felt like work.
No, dude, again, same thing like we were talking about. Like, if it weren't for the pandemic, this record would have never happened. I mean, this would have never happened. So I'm really thankful that, for all the setbacks that came from this year, this record was one of the primary things that's a positive that came from this year. So yeah, I mean, with that in mind, I can't complain too bad about 2020.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of been a very strange year in that way that there's going to be some really interesting things that, as you say, wouldn't have happened. There's going to be kind of a really kind of interesting 2021 bunch of releases that everyone's looked for different ways of doing things, innovative ways of doing things,
right.
Just looking at things from a different angle because they've had to. You sort of feel like creatively there could be some really interesting albums coming out next year, and certainly yours is going to be top of my list to listen to now coming into next year. Because so when is it likely to hit our ears?
I don't know. We've been talking about it a lot, and the good news is there's no real requirement. No one's going to hold your feet to the fire about anything. I mean, we're all coming out of the gate 2021 with new material. Everybody is. And so you would think that would be a really detrimental thing, but honestly, it's kind of a good thing. It's because, just like you said, because people are going to be so ravenous for new stuff, and there's going to be so many new things that are going to come out. I can't imagine it not being anything but just like I'd like to see another renaissance, just really a time when creative people are really celebrated again, and I feel like that musically, I feel like we kind of need that. I feel like the more creative folks need to be celebrated. We were on the cusp of it, between Stapleton and Sturgill and guys like that, just really having the quality of the music and the recording and the songs like really starting to take precedence. We were getting there, and just I think just this year was just a little bit of a hiccup, but it was just enough to where everybody's coming out with new stuff. And so I don't know what we're gonna do. I mean, like I said, the records, we're done, but we just got to come up with a plan, and not necessarily, like I said, there's no competitive plan to it. It's just a plan that's going to make sense. So I mean, I would say probably early spring, but we may put something out in January. I don't know. I mean, it's just no telling. All bets are off now. It's a Wild West,
So where can people check out? What's the best place for people to keep in touch with all the latest news?
AdamHood.com will get you to any place you need to go. All my links to social media, so Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all that stuff is on AdamHood.com. My merch store is on there. There's all the albums are available for download, and you can get links to iTunes and Spotify and stuff like that. So if you can just go to AdamHood.com, that'll kind of direct you anywhere you want to be in my world.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, Just one more question for you, which is the recommendation part of the show. We've already had the John Hyatt recommendation earlier on in the interview, so we'll put that link to that song. But also, basically, it's an artist that people need to know. Really, it could be someone new, or it could be someone that's really influenced you over the years, whichever way you want to take it.
My two guys, okay, my top two are John Hyatt's always been number one. Delbert McClinton has always been number two. And, so Delbert he and Glenn Clark made these two albums in the 70s, maybe. I can't remember specifically the dates, but they were kind of these lost albums. And I think one of them is available on Spotify now. It's called Delbert and Glenn. And they made the Delbert and Glenn album, and then they made one called Second Helping that I hope will be on Spotify. Well, for years and years and years, it was hard to find. And I was a buddy of mine, Justin Johnson, who had a recording of half of the first record. I listened to it forever. When I was out in LA making Different Groove, I found a CD that had both albums on one CD, and I gave that to Brent Cobb a couple of years after I'd really worn it out. And so I'd say if you can put your finger on those records, they're game changers. They're game changers. I mean, it really, this whole country funk and this greasy kind of country thing is something that I think people, a lot of folks are trying to make it, but those Delbert and Glenn albums were made like that. That was effortless versions. There was no intention. It just came out like that, because you're talking about two guys that really, like I said, they just kind of their collaboration together really set me off. And man, I love it. And so Delbert McClinton is probably the other guy that I could say you can dig through all his stuff and understand, what Southern music really is. So.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, Adam. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And
thank you. I appreciate you having fun. Thank you.
Can't wait to hear the new album. Good luck with it all, and maybe we'll see you over this side of the pond at some point.
I hope so. We've been chomping at the bit to get over there sometime, and I know there's a real appreciation for a rootsier kind of music over there. So we need to keep in touch and see if we can't make that happen sometime. I'd really love to do it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Adam. Take care, stay safe, and have a great Christmas. Enjoy the holiday season, and good luck for everything for next year.
Thank you so much. You guys too. Y'all be careful. Thank you.